I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline. How's it going today?
It's going really well, Bryce. How are you doing?
Really good. Really good, actually. It's kind of weird. We're kind of coming up towards the end of summer now.
Yep.
And, I'm okay with switching. I'll be totally honest with you and our listeners. I'm totally okay with switching into fall mode. I say, bring on the sweaters, bring on the cardigans, which I'm a big fan of. Let's bring those back into rotation. I'm okay to retire the shorts for another year.
Absolutely. I'm ready to switch from my summer weight cardigans to my fall weight cardigans.
Nice. Well, one of the things too with, obviously it's switching from, summer to fall, of course, is all the kiddos and everybody else going back to school here. And Caroline, we were talking before, and we thought, we love talking about, the best of this from pop culture and the best of that.
Yeah.
And we thought, you know what? Let's do an episode where we talk about, kind of back to school, but let's talk about our favorite, pop culture teachers and schools and all of that stuff. And that's what we're going to be going over today, right?
Yes. And it's been a while since I did go back to school. Trying to think, probably close. I think I'm coming up on 15 years since I was last in school, but still definitely get that feeling that I should be maybe buying some new pens and a notebook or two.
Yeah, definitely. It's been over 20 years for me since I graduated college. So Cheryl, my wife Cheryl, she just kind of went through the whole school thing, and I don't know, there's a point about 10 years ago where I was like, I did think about kind of going back to school and upgrading some of my education, and then I saw what she went through, and I was just like, no, that's not for me. I'm good. I'm a terrible student, so yeah. But we've got a great guest joining us today, and I'm so happy that he's able to return to the podcast. He was last on, I think it might have been almost 2 years ago now. It was episode 63, which was our Young Readers' Choice Awards episode, and he's the manager of our Calder branch, Kyle Marshall. Kyle, welcome back to Overdue Finds. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's great to be back. I can't believe it's been almost 2 years. I had a bit of a stretch where I was on a little bit more frequently, but yeah, it's well worth the wait, I think.
This is actually your Caroline is really good at kind of going back and figuring out how many times a guest has been on. This is episode 4. So much like SNL, we have our 5 timers club. So you're one show away from, getting that embroidered smoking jacket from us with the Overdue Finds logo and all the other perks that come with being a member of the Overdue Finds 5 timers club. So you're almost there.
I didn't know the podcast budget was into the smoking jacket realm, but winter's coming. I'll really have to make another pitch leading up to winter so I can stay warm in my office.
Before we start sharing our picks for our favorite pop culture schools and teachers and everything, let's share some of our own overdue finds that we've been enjoying since our last episode. Kyle, it's been a while, so what have you been enjoying lately?
When I come on the podcast, there are always so many things that I can talk about. But the last podcast that I had listened to, you folks were wrapping up your top pop culture lists of the year so far. So that was probably a couple episodes ago by the time this was airing. And you had both spoken about your maybe dearth of musical knowledge. And so I thought I'd come in with a bit of an interesting music pick for everyone. So the find I'm going to recommend is an album called Motomami by Rosalia. It can be found as a CD in our collection. And so some of the listeners may know she's a Spanish pop star. She's from kind of the Catalonia region in Spain. Describing her music's a bit challenging, though, because she broke through with this flamenco-tinged pop in, I think it was 2017 or 18 or in that range. But she's really since become a bit of a musical chameleon. She kind of bounces between different genres, quite creative, risky, a little bit innovative in what's probably some critics are calling an experimental pop. genre now, which is kind of cool because it has the trappings and the musicality of pop that keeps people going with certain melodies, but it challenges audiences in different ways. She is very internationally famous. So while some people in Canada are a little less familiar with her, she's collaborated with The Weeknd, James Blake, Q-Tip, Pharrell Williams. So very well regarded internationally, especially in Europe and in the Latin American Spanish speaking countries. She sings in Spanish, and actually The Weeknd sings in Spanish on this album, which is something I did not know he could do. So he's having his Despacito moment there too. She has an unbelievable voice. It's versatile. She's got an impressive range. It's very powerful. When I was in Spain in 2018, I went to some flamenco bars, and it was just an incredibly emotionally touching style of music. And so when she does those kind of runs in her music, it's really interesting too. So it's a recommendation that I'd have for people who are looking for something that's melodic, but maybe can break out of into a different genre with a different language and also different genres that are kind of being layered onto the pop lens.
Sounds really cool. That album, did it just come out like this year then, or is that an older album?
I believe it was early 2022, so it would be a fit for this year. I think it was January, February, March this year.
So could you see her breaking big in North America here soon? Based on kind of like you said, those collaborations with The Weeknd and a few others?
Yeah, I think she's won some pretty significant awards. I'm trying to remember. I think she's won like Latin Grammys, which is not. It's interesting because I think Latin music as a massive and perhaps ill-conceived genre has really expanded into the mainstream in the last few years with J Balvin and Bad Bunny and multiple different artists who are now I think being appreciated while they're singing in their native language in an English marketplace. So I think there is that opportunity there, but I thought she won a big award like Best New Artist at the Grammys a little while ago, which is also kind of a gateway into the Canadian marketplace too.
I was just going to quickly say, so I make it 2 episodes in a row now. Bad Bunny, by the way, pretty good professional wrestler. Showed up at WrestleMania a couple of years ago. Did a great job.
Kyle, but I wanted to ask, as you referenced Bryce and I not being maybe the most adventurous or the on top of the new discoveries with music. Where do you find music to listen to? How do you discover artists?
That's a great question. So I love reading critical reviews. There's a website that I use called Metacritic. And so it's kind of like a review aggregator, kind of like Rotten Tomatoes would be for movies. And what I like about that is it takes a variety of different critical tastes and distills it into a very reductive number that scores the album. But if I'm kind of looking for higher scored albums, it does really expand my repertoire of what I'm listening to. And so all different types of genres. I've decided that the one genre that even if it's a high scored album, I will not really listen to is heavy metal. I just can't get into it. And I think Bryce may like some of those tips, but some of those albums, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. But and I feel like it's definitely an interesting way to see what's coming out, what's new, what is being acclaimed, but it's often outside of the pop sphere. Though I do think critics in general are starting to view pop music more positively, and I think for the craft that it is, rather than just viewing it as a little bit simplistic music like it has been done historically.
Nice. Well, we now know where to go to get cooler music picks, Caroline.
Yeah.
So after this.
Yeah.
Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
I have a young adult book that came out a couple years ago, and it's by the same co-author, Sophie Gonzalez, as If This Gets Out, which I talked about earlier this year. That was my members of a boy band falling for each other while on tour in Europe. So Sophie Gonzalez was one of the authors of that book. She also is the author of Only Mostly Devastated, which is the story of Ollie, a teenage boy from California who spends the summer in North Carolina, where he meets Will, an amazing basketball player, the guy of his dreams. They have a wonderful summer romance, and then the summer ends. But turns out Ollie is going to be going to school in North Carolina this year because his aunt is not well, and their families decided to stay around and care for her. He shows up, first day of school. Who is there but Will, his summer romance? One problem: Will doesn't want anyone to know that he's gay. So he's the school's basketball star, Mr. Popular, has this group of friends, and is kind of a jerk to Ollie because he is trying to manage his feelings in this. Ollie doesn't know what's going on. He befriends this other group of girls. And if you're starting to think, Caroline, this sounds a lot like Grease, you would be correct. This book is summer loving by Grease meets. Did either of you ever read books by Lurleen McDaniel? Okay, so
No.
Lurleen McDaniel wrote a very niche, specific type of book, and that was the teen illness book. Books like Too Young to Die, I Want to Live. The kids, they had cancer, they had different days. So this is like Grease meets Lurleen McDaniel with some of the scenes with Ollie's aunt and everything that's going on in his life, but also with a 21st century twist on romance. So I'm reading it having very strong feelings about how these high school teenagers are behaving, and it's really, I think, a good lesson for me in being patient with characters. All of the characters, none of them are 100% good or 100% bad. They're all complicated people who are just trying to do the best that they can with all of the pressures in their lives, and sometimes they make not great choices, and sometimes they manage to put everything together and maybe, just maybe, find that romance that they're looking for. So that is Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzalez.
That sounds actually really good, and I could totally see that being turned into like a Netflix movie or
for sure,
something like that.
Yeah, very much so.
But it's interesting though, the setting North Carolina, for my sports knowledge, very big basketball country and everything. So yeah, I could totally see that with that character. It's Will, right? Will's the basketball player.
Will's the basketball star, and Ollie comes from, I want to say San Jose, but California. In general, and part of the book is talking about the difference of being out in California versus small town North Carolina, and the experiences that different characters have had based on that. And it's not vilifying any area. It's not saying that the North Carolina small town area is worse than being in other places, but just how the geography and realities of your environment can play into some of the choices that people make.
Sure.
That's great. I think that some queer YA has almost jumped into the realm of universal acceptance. And previously it was almost the opposite, right? It was universal kind of defiance or negativity around the coming out process. And so it's interesting to see this nuanced depiction coming back into play, which I think is the reality for most people, regardless of where they live, is that it's not going to be all one or the other. And there's and not everyone's going to be happily out at 14 in the way that we're seeing in some depictions. That book sounds pretty great though, Caroline.
I really enjoyed it. I picked it up. It was one of the ones, I was between books at the time and was just kind of walking around the workroom and looking at the book carts that we had of stuff to be shelved, and I saw this and I thought I'll give it a whirl, and I'm glad that I did, because it's not often I get to drop Grease meets Lurleen McDaniel. So that might be the first time that's ever been said as a sentence. So yeah. Bryce, what have you been enjoying lately?
I'm not sure if both of you noticed this. This was a few weeks ago on social media, and it was kind of making the rounds that some people pointed out it was like a Jetsons super fan, that the character of George Jetson was born on couple weeks ago on July 31st, 2022. So kind of got me thinking, and this week I'm actually recommending that listeners go back and watch the classic Hanna-Barbera series, The Jetsons. And we actually have all 3 seasons of the classic show on DVD that you can borrow from us. Caroline, I'm not going to lie, I actually have all 3 seasons on DVD here at home. I'm a huge Jetsons fan.
Really?
So when I saw it was trending, I was like, let's recommend. That's going to be my next Overdue Find pick. So, if you're not that familiar with the Jetsons, it actually originally aired on network TV in 1962, and of course follows the Jetson family who live in the year 2062. That's only 40 years away from now, and I don't know if we're going to get briefcases, like flying cars that fold down into briefcases. I'd be shocked if we get that within the next 40 years, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that actually happens. It follows father and husband George Jetson, and he works for his demanding boss, Mr. Spacely at Spacely Space Sprockets. And it's interesting because the show actually originally only aired for 1 season in 1962, but the show was popular in syndication, so they actually created 2 more seasons in 1985. So when you're watching these, like if you borrow the first DVD set, obviously that's the 1962 version. The second one is from 1985, and you're going to notice just obviously like a little bit of difference in voices. Definitely the artwork is more colorful in the 80s episodes, but they're all fun to watch. I definitely encourage people, if it's been a while since you've watched it, go back and explore that one. And also too, Caroline, we love our theme music, TV theme music here on Overdue Finds, and the Jetsons has one of the best openings and most catchy theme music of any TV series. So yeah, that's my pick this week.
I would agree with that about the theme music. Also, it's part of that genre of shows that like tell you pretty much everything you need to know in the theme song. So that's helpful for getting people caught up on it. I was looking into this because I did see, people were saying like, oh, George Jetson is about to be born somewhere. I was reading this article that kind of suggested that the Jetsons is perpetually set 100 years in the future. And so we'll never actually get to that future because it's always kind of like 100 years from where you are now. And I kind of like that, but I also like that, no, it was 2062. So firm, nailed down, ready to go.
Yeah. But that makes sense. Obviously, the show, premiered in 1962, and 100 years, into the future is when technically the show was based, I guess. But who knows? But I mean, there's stuff that that's in that show that did come true. Like, I mean, I think about their phones, where essentially they're just on Zoom calls, and I mean, we have that now, and they have like this like freeze dried food in their house that they press a button and then it a giant pizza comes out or whatever. So it's little stuff like that we're not that far off of, but it's the flying cars I don't think we'll ever have.
No.
It's way too dangerous if you think about the logistics of it. Like,
I guess that's true.
All right. So today, of course, we're chatting all about back to school. Parents are excited, and I think some kids are kind of excited too. But, that kind of reminds me, like, before we talk about our favorite schools and teachers and all that stuff, let's talk about a bit about our own experiences in school. So I have to ask both of you, Kyle, I'm going to start with you. What kind of student were you?
I think it probably won't surprise too many people that when I was a small kid, at least, I was a bit of a teacher's pet, if I'm being honest. I was raised by a teacher. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. I'm now married to a teacher. So schools have always been a big part of my life. And those rhythms that you were talking about earlier about fall has always felt like the start of the year to me rather than January. But back to your question, I mean, I was, a decently high achieving kid. I tried many things. I was a joiner for sure. And that followed me through into high school, where I was on students council, involved in multiple sports teams, drama, all types of different things. But yeah, I would say I was fairly academic, but also very social. And so those two things kind of came to a head in junior high age, roughly, when I found that it was challenging to be perceived both as academic, high achieving, and yet also relatable and kind of cool with your peers. And so I think that period of time, I was a little bit more rebellious as I tried to strike that balance. And then high school, I kind of fell into place a little bit more naturally, and that progressed into university. But when I look back at those years, I think that's probably, I would say, teacher's pet younger, and then just fairly keen yet slightly rebellious junior high, and then more of a balance in high school.
Caroline, how about yourself?
I was a good student, got fairly high marks all through elementary school and into high school. I hated back to school. I hated going back in September. It's like, honestly, anytime starting now, I still feel that. There used to be a commercial for, I think, Staples, and the music was "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year," and it had like this dad figure, like doing jetés and things in the aisle as he was running around, just so excited. And the kids were like so upset because summer was the best. Summer, I got to sleep in and read and swim and do basically whatever I wanted. And then school was not that. And so I I was frequently looking for opportunities to stay home sick, catch The Price is Right, or
Naturally.
yeah. So I was a really good student, but I didn't always enjoy school that much.
Were Mama and Papa Land having the sick excuses, or were you staying home on the couch, or were you being forced to go?
I was generally staying home. I knew pretty well how to push it, and then there would get to the end where it's like everyone in this situation is aware that you're not actually sick. However, we are going to allow it, and then I'd have to kind of get my act together. But similar thing. My mom was a teacher. She's retired now. My great grandmother, my sister has a degree in education. So a lot of teachers in the family. I'm the rebel librarian, I guess. But especially in elementary school, I did really well in the core subjects, but I was not athletic or artistic. And so gym and art always dragged my grades down. So I was never kind of that top student in that. And then as I got a bit older and, school embraced, I think, a little more diversity and creativity, I got to see, hey, maybe I'm not terrible at art. I just wasn't good at it the way it was being done at the time. So yeah, how about you, Bryce?
I was just going to say, man, if it wasn't for phys ed, I don't know if I would have passed a couple of grades, to be honest with you. Although I will say, I remember one year in junior high, on my report card, I got a failing grade in phys ed. And the only reason I remember I got a failing grade in phys ed is because I think Kyle, did you grow up here?
No, I grew up in a small town in BC. Yeah.
That's right. People who grew up here in Alberta will remember in phys ed in junior high, we had to take dance. So
that's not an Alberta only thing, Bryce. That's
not an. For some reason, I thought it was like an Alberta only thing. We had to learn like Cadillac Ranch dance, and I remember doing the MC Hammer dance. This is early '90s.
That one might just be you.
Yeah, totally. That's
I've never heard that one before.
We all had to wear parachute pants. No, just joking. But I remember like hating that and just being a jerk and goofing off. And I remember getting a failing grade on the one report card. But yeah, I mean, school in general, I was never a great student at all. I was, Yeah, I mean, I never minded going back to school because I remember like kind of by the end of the summer, I was like ready to spend more time with, see more friends again and, stuff like that. So, but yeah, school just kind of bored me. And I was always like, if you look up the definition of like average student in the dictionary, like that would kind of explain my education pretty much up really through high school and everything. I don't want to say like I didn't care, but it's just nothing. Like there's a few subjects that I was generally interested in. Like I always loved social studies, like history. English I was also really good at and got really good grades. But yeah, math and science are not my courses at all, and always struggled with that stuff. But once I got to college, I was really good and got good grades and everything, and maybe it's just more of a maturity thing, but I was never the best student. It's funny because like when I go back and I watch early episodes of The Simpsons, Bart's like 10 years old in grade 4, and that's kind of when The Simpsons started. I was that age. I was in grade 4 and 10 years old, and I kind of identified with him a little bit. Like I wasn't never like, most people would consider the character of Bart Simpson to be cool. I never really considered myself that, but just somebody who wasn't really interested in what was being taught and would try and be like a smartass and make a joke. That was me. So not surprising to most people who know me anyway. But it took me a while to come around on school.
Sounds like, Bryce, maybe things could have been different for you if you had one of these inspirational teachers that pop culture is so fond of having. There's some pretty famous examples in there. But when it comes to these inspiring teachers, the ones who can bring out the best in their students, who stands out to you, Kyle?
I think there are definitely many, but one person who is a little kind of past my time and yet has had a bit of a cultural moment through memes in the past decade is Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. Basically, like she is the queen of experiential learning, always diving into an organism or a planetary system or whatever to explore science in a different light. And I believe it was mostly science, right? Yeah, so biology and astronomy, all different types of science. And I think, looking back on it, those are experiences that you would never forget if you grew up. If you're looking back on influential or inspiring teachers from your lifetime, I mean, Ms. Frizzle would be pretty impossible to beat. I think as a kid, maybe her level of chaos would have been too much for structured little Kyle. But I mean,
what's the grading rubric like?
But totally, exactly. Give me my success measures here. But I mean, there's no doubt that the adventures would have been inspiring and memorable. I feel like arts teachers and science teachers both can have these kind of kooky, super passionate vibes that are almost unique to their subjects. I mean, you can have passionate teachers about math. That's a little bit harder to, I think, inspire the students in, but props to the people who can do that. But I think like art teachers really derive a lot of influence in drawing excitement through creative expression, whereas there's so much excitement for science teachers like Miss Frizzle and like uncovering the secrets to life and some of our biggest questions. And so, yeah, I think Miss Frizzle is pretty hard to beat in that realm.
Bryce, who stands out to you for inspiring, awesome teachers?
Yeah, I was looking at this, and the first name that popped in my head, and I wish we had it in our collection, but we don't. It's Mrs. Peggy Hill from King of the Hill. So Peggy Hill, for those of you not as familiar maybe with King of the Hill, she won back-to-back substitute teacher of the year awards in Arlen, Texas in the mid-90s. And that's just it. Like Peggy's like most of the time she's a stay-at-home mom, but she is a substitute teacher and she's filling in wherever she's needed. Now, I will say, if you watch the show, you'll find out, and you're probably questioning my pick here, Peggy Hill sometimes is not the greatest of teachers. Maybe there was one time where she took the kids on a school trip to Mexico and she brought back an extra kid accidentally from Mexico. Or maybe there was the episode where she spanked a kid in class after he pantsed her. So there's a few little examples like that. But the one thing that you can't take away from Mrs. Peggy Hill is her commitment to education and learning. She would, I think of an episode where she was substituting at a high school for a football player, and if he didn't get a good enough grade, then he wasn't going to get to play in the big game. And she worked with him, and she's just a very committed educator. She's definitely overconfident for sure, but Peggy Hill really stood out to me.
That Texan swagger, right? I think it's part and parcel of the culture. I didn't watch King of the Hill a lot. I think, was it adjacent in certain time slots to The Simpsons, maybe?
Yeah, it would air on like Sunday nights after The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly. So I would watch The Simpsons, and sometimes I'd stick around for King of the Hill and sometimes not. The only time I do remember Peggy Hill as a teacher was her mustering up the courage. She was substituting sex ed, I think, and was mustering up the courage to yell out the names of genitalia. I'm seeing you're both nodding. But that is a scene that I still remember from probably 2001 when I watched it or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's very funny. Caroline, were you a King of the Hill fan?
Yeah, I watched a lot of it. I was kind of questioning your choice, as you said, but I think you hit something there. And then there's something interesting about the role of the substitute teacher. You know, the person who just kind of comes in and has a short impact, positive or negative, on it. I think it's a little bit different, but when I'm thinking of substitute teachers, two came to mind. One is Mr. Bergstrom from Lisa's substitute in The Simpsons, and the second one is Viola Swamp from Miss Nelson is Missing, and it, like, spoiler alert, Miss Nelson is Viola Swamp, I think. It's like the bad substitute who like scares all the kids into behaving. When I was thinking of this, I was thinking of like who kind of has an impact longer term, but the substitute who has a brief but passionate stay with a young learner like that.
Dewey Finn from School of Rock. I think Jack Black's character, there's another great example of incredibly impactful. He had a bit of a longer contract there, but yeah, that's the substitute teacher quite often can come in and really shake things up, right?
Yeah, and that, I think, like the longer term new person coming into the school is also my pick for this. I have 3 names for you: Sister Mary Clarence. That is, of course, Whoopi Goldberg in Sister Act 2. You could make the argument that she is a teacher with the choir in Sister Act 1, but in Sister Act 2, she's actually in a school teaching a bunch of students, including Lauryn Hill, how to sing together as an effective choir. So, coming in, teaching them lessons about music and life, and getting those harmonies down. I just love Sister Act. So
we've talked about this before a little bit. I know you're a huge fan of Sister Act 2 in particular, correct?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that Sister Act 2 deep dive episode of Overdue Finds.
I'm ready. I'm good. I rewatched the first one not that long ago, so I'm due for a Sister Act 2 rewatch coming up now. We don't have it in the catalog, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but Mr. Shoop from the movie Summer School. Now, Summer School is not a movie that I even really recommend, but it was a movie that was always on like TBS sometime around like Memorial Day weekend. So it was just one of these movies that I watched every single year, and now I just kind of look for it to watch sometime in the summer. Mr. Shoop is a gym teacher who is kind of blackmailed into teaching summer school, a bunch of students who have failed English, and through all kinds of machinations, if every student can't pass the class, he is going to be fired and lose his job. So he's highly motivated to get these kids learning. There's field trips, there's beach days, there's chainsaw massacres, there's like everything happening in this movie. And without giving too much away, the ending, I think, reveals just how effective a teacher Mr. Shoop is. So if you come across Summer School, again, don't know that I recommend it, but I do kind of love it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the movie Summer School, and I think that was the movie that introduced me at a very young age to the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the very first time. But yeah, there's some creepy stuff kind of going on in that movie. It's definitely not aged well, but I mean, it's an 80s high school movie, so you know, you gotta kind of take it for what it's for what it's worth. But yeah, like he does a great, like Mr. Shoop does a great job. Like it's not like I don't know, something like Mr. Holland's Opus where he's, you know, driven to like be the best teacher he can be, but like, you know, this is one where he's reluctantly there, and he makes the best of the situation, realizes that he's a great teacher in the end. And I have to give a shout out too, actually, I do have a teacher connection. My younger brother, he is also a teacher as well, and he teaches summer school. So that's not an easy job for anybody.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
At the other end, teacher characters are sometimes set up against a student hero as someone to maybe fight against. Which teachers are you glad you never had in real life? So Kyle, you mentioned you're a little bit of a teacher's pet. Is there any teachers here you were just like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to warm over any of these teachers.
You know, I mean, the list is pretty long. I think there's something, I think, galvanizing for a lot of young kids who don't enjoy the school environment, and you know, when you're younger, you view things more black and white. And thus, like, having this teacher to fight against can mimic your own struggles that you're seeing in your own classroom. But for me, I don't think anyone comes close to Ms. Trunchbull from Matilda. She, you know, it's a Roald Dahl book. It was made into a musical. It was made into a movie in the 90s. For me, when I was thinking about her, it really begged the question, can female characters embody toxic masculinity? Because that is Ms. Trunchbull to a T. She comes as close as it comes, I think, as it gets to embodying that. I mean, the sadistic punishment, who can forget that chocolate cake scene where she forces the kid to eat chocolate cake until he's extremely sick? The throwing of children. I don't think I've ever been thrown before. I don't know how I would have reacted to that as a kid. You know, near fatal punishments, riding crops, rewriting the dictionary by hand. She was nothing if not creative in her sadism. And I think, you know, while I wasn't in trouble very much as a kid, I think that she's the type of teacher whose inequities, her unfair treatment would have really struck to my core, and it would have gotten me up in arms as it did with Matilda. You know, fairness is something that kids feel so keenly, and I'm sure I would if I were in her classroom. Quick sidebar, I saw the musical Matilda at the Citadel. I had season's tickets a few years ago. And I wasn't really expecting much, to be frank. Like, I watched the movie as a kid. I'd never read the book. It's a fabulous musical, really catchy songs, very touching in many parts. And John Uliat, who's a local actor here in Edmonton, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, actually played the part of Miss Trunchbull. And he had quite the set of shoulder pads to embellish her size and imposing figure. And so, yeah, it was an incredible performance. There's a lot of fun to be had with that, but I would have definitely been fearful and upset with a teacher like that.
I think there's an adaptation of the musical being made into a movie that's coming out later this year, and I think it has Emma Thompson as Miss Trunchbull.
Interesting.
So I'm familiar with Matilda. I haven't watched the movie, didn't read the book. You mentioned there was a punishment, though, where kids had to, like, write out the dictionary?
I believe so. And so like this one, I found through researching Miss Trunchbull, because I'm not that familiar with Matilda beyond just remembering the horror that she struck in kids. I don't know, Caroline, if you can fill this in, but I do believe that was part of the whole chocolate cake ruse, is that at the end the kids had to rewrite the dictionary by hand. I don't think, like, Roald Dahl didn't spend time describing this over chapters, but it was just adding on to the layers of unfairness.
And I think that that's like that almost the creativity makes things worse. It's not just punishment. I mean, no punishment is good punishment, but that there is this level of like cruelty and enjoyment being taken in the cruelty is something I'm honestly getting a little anxious even just talking about her, because that's just not a character or a thing that I find enjoyable. And so I honestly, I think it's one of the reasons I never did go harder onto Matilda, because as a young bookish girl, Matilda should really really speak to me, and I just never really was able to get into it. And I think it's because Trunchbull just made me so anxious.
I have to admit something. So in elementary school, there was a few times where I got into trouble, just being a boy, and my punishment was I had to rewrite pages of the dictionary.
What? Okay.
Yes. That's why I was asking, because there was a few times where, I got into a fight or something like that, and I'd have to bring the dictionary home, pick a page, and like write, like sometimes it was like half a page you'd have to rewrite out. And I remember one time there was like a whole page I had to write out of the dictionary. That's a legit punishment. I hope kids still don't have to do that, but I've done it and I've survived. So yeah. Caroline, how about you?
I have such a list. I don't know if you can see
Oh
my notes here, but this part here are the teachers I'm glad I never had on here. I'm going to go quickly through some of them. Sorry, Bryce, if I'm stealing yours. First one, Victor Garber as Professor Callahan in Legally Blonde. You think maybe he's okay because he seems to be encouraging Elle Woods in class, but then no, A sexually harasses her, tries to blackmail her into sleeping with him in order to get a job at his law firm as an intern. Just not okay. Mr. Schuster from Glee. Also not okay to plant drugs on your students to blackmail them into joining the Glee Club. Basically, blackmail in any form, no, just don't do it. Also, he was supposed to be like running the Glee Club. He gave himself so many of the best like singing numbers. That's not going to help them, Mr. Schuster. So also, everything with like again with Jane Lynch, who's an amazing actress, and her character work with Sue Sylvester was great. But again, like, who let her in a school to be around youth? All of the teachers in 10 Things I Hate About You, they are not good. They are not present. Allison Janney, who I love, very funny as a guidance counselor writing a romance novel. Not appropriate. Not appropriate to be doing that on school time when you are supposed to be helping kids. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I knew this was going to be on the list. I am not going with Principal Rooney. I'm going with Ben Stein as the economics teacher. It's like the classic, like, droning on. No one in that room is learning anything. And Ben Stein, I know it's not that Ben Stein is not the actual teacher. He is the actor playing the teacher, but he is very smart and he could be imparting a lot of wisdom. And it's just so droning the way that it is. It's just not effective teaching. And my last choice, this was probably the most tense I've ever been when I was watching a movie in a theater. I'm sitting in the theater looking up at the screen and just Ugh. And that is Dr. Terrence Fletcher, aka J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. Oh, I can't. I have no desire to rewatch it. He's an amazing actor. The performance is really great. Very glad that he did so well with that. I have no desire to rewatch Whiplash because, again, I just can't stand this stress. Oh, I feel like I've unloaded something now. I feel so much better about things.
He's like Hannibal Lecter scary,
Yeah.
like just intense and is like a snake just waiting to pounce and you don't know what he's going to do. And it's like you say, it's a fantastic movie and I've only watched it once, but you're right. It's stressful to watch that movie.
And speaking of like Blackmail, the Matthew Broderick's character in Election, who it's so incredibly petty and gets drawn down into this really petty conflict with, I think it was Reese Witherspoon's high school character. And there's another. Yeah. I mean, this list could definitely go on, right, Caroline?
Well, and he in that one, he is upset because his teacher friend was sleeping with the high school student and got into trouble for it. That is not the fault of the student. So I think there's some very obvious lessons to be learned from these characters here.
That's I think I mentioned this in a previous episode because I know Election was past Overdue Finds, pick a mine. I believe Barack Obama in an interview said it's like his all-time favorite movie. Which I thought was amazing.
Yeah. So for me, it was easier to come up with these teachers I'm glad that I never had. What about you, Bryce? Who stuck out for you?
Yeah, luckily we didn't have too many crossovers there. But so the first one for me, I feel for this teacher a little bit now as I'm older watching the movie, but I wouldn't have wanted him as a teacher. And that's Mr. Hand from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the strict history teacher. Do not order a pizza to his class. He probably will accuse you of being on dope. Even if you're not, that's just his thing. Roll with it. But yeah, Mr. Hand for sure. And it's funny, as somebody who loves history, I think I would have done maybe okay in his class, but he just seems like he'd be very hard, like marker. And maybe those papers I might not do too well on. A couple others that haven't been mentioned. Professor Ross Geller on Friends, the paleontology teacher. He just never seemed prepared and was dating students, I think, at one point. And
sleeping with them in the library. That one might not have been a student, but still, he was discovered having sex in the university library.
A couple others, and it's funny because I was looking at some lists of pop culture teachers, and this one kind of popped up on the best list, and I was like, was he though? Yoda from Star Wars. He, of course, teaches Luke Skywalker the ways to be a Jedi and everything, but like he speaks in riddles. He doesn't want to be bothered. He's kind of a jerk. Like, I don't think he's a great teacher. He's obviously a very memorable character, and we all love Yoda and Baby Yoda, who's not really Baby Yoda, but you know what I mean. But yeah, Yoda was not. I wouldn't want to have Yoda teach me the ways of the Jedi. It would be very challenging, to say the least. And my last one is Mr. Garrison from South Park. Definitely not the best teacher. Definitely inappropriate. Some of the stuff he's talking about in class with the students. Ends up running for president and then comes back, and just there's a lot going on with Mr. Garrison. But hands down, Mr. Garrison for me is like the worst pop culture teacher for sure.
I feel like there is so much stress and anxiety wrapped up in this for me. And I am aware that like the characters, maybe not all of them, like Ferris Bueller, for example, I should have looked up his name, but Ben Stein in that movie is not the driving force in it, but quite often, like, I mean, Mr. Schuester, for example, is from Glee. His poor behavior is to make it a better show. And like, on the one hand, I get that, right? Like I'm going like, they need to follow the rules. They need to teach to a curriculum, and like they need to, I know that it's being done to tell a more interesting story, but there really is a part of me that's like, wow, if there was just a show where somebody was calm and followed the rules and never did anything bad, I would love to watch that. And it would just be very calm and reassuring and soothing. So I think that probably says more about me and as a viewer and a student, because that's what I wanted. I wanted that calmness. So as we said, none of us actually went to school here in Edmonton. Different areas, different provinces. But what do you think are some of the best fictional schools out there? And is there one you wish you went to?
You know, it's funny. I mean, I enjoy watching a lot of these schools. Is there one that I definitely wanted to go to? I don't know. I mean, I'm not big on promoting too much of J.K. Rowling's work. She doesn't need it right now. But Hogwarts, I think, is definitely a school that many of us wanted to go to as kids, teenagers, even young adults. I mean, there's such romance in that gorgeous castle set in Scotland, the magic, the pageantry, the traditions, the rich traditions. I think like it kind of had everything. So Hogwarts is definitely up there. Even the competition between houses and the way in which we still like to categorize ourselves into those houses and compare and contrast that. Hogwarts is definitely up there. I think for pure enjoyment and hilarity, I mean, Big Mouth, the school at Big Mouth is definitely one of those, which is a cartoon basically. The central premise is the challenges that kids navigate through when they're going through puberty. And so they have these hormone monsters that kind of represent their id. And it's voiced a lot by Nick Kroll and many other great voice actors. So that's a wonderful and really chaotic one that would be interesting to be a part of. I don't know if I would have loved to have gone there as a kid, but as an adult, I think looking back, and I think that's actually part of the relief of the show. I wonder if any kids that age watch it and enjoy it. I mean, it's definitely has some very strong language in parts. I don't know if most parents would be into that, but I don't know if part of the fun of that show is the retrospective. We got through that. Like that was horrible in so many ways. The social dynamics of it, the weird body stuff, our brains not being fully developed. It was not easy, but in hindsight, I think it's a hilarious show to watch. Similarly, another contemporary one, Moordale, which is in sex education. I mean, there's often a teacher versus student body conflict going on there. It's in England and, of course, has a beautiful old building as well. Interesting, diverse school population that's going through different challenges. I almost hesitate to choose a school that has too much perfection going on, because that's not what high school or school should be about necessarily. I guess the question was about all schools, but I mean, high school, you really can't manufacture perfection with all those hormones going on and all those changes and social dynamics that people are working through and in those years. So I don't think there's a perfect one, but those are a few of the ones that I think would be intriguing or maybe fun to go to.
Yeah, so a couple that stand out to me. I've got 3 picks. So first of all, I'm starting off my elementary school, and Caroline, I have a feeling this one may be on your list. Wagstaff School from Bob's Burgers. The teachers are definitely questionable, especially the school librarian. But what's his name? Is it Mr. Ambrose?
I think so. Played by Billy Eichner, yeah.
Yes. Wagstaff from Bob's Burgers. For the most part, I mean, the kids all kind of seem to get along and all of that stuff. So a few little hiccups here and there, but I think that would have been a fun elementary school to go to. For high school, I'm going to go with Bayside High from Saved by the Bell. I mean, you have to watch for Zach Morris doing his little timeout thing, which would freeze time a little bit for everybody but him. That's kind of weird. But for the most part, though, like Bayside High seemed to be a pretty cool place to go to school. Got to go eat at, was it the Mac after school? Max, yes. So there's that. So definitely choosing Bayside High. For college, this one I struggled with a little bit, and this definitely does not seem like the best college at all. And it's a questionable movie today. It was released in the late 70s, but I'm going with Faber College from National Lampoon's Animal House. This is like the ultimate, like, ooh, that evil, so that evil, you know, those evil lugs at Animal House and everything like that. So you got the crusty old dean, and you've got the do-gooders in the other house, and there's definitely some questionable antics going on in that movie. But that's like the most kind of like typical, like if you're making a terrible kind of college movie, that's the basis for it. That's the one that really started it all. So yeah, those are my picks. Caroline, how about you?
I had a few, and most of them, like, I'm considering, are they the best schools? No, of course not. But are they the ones I'd want to go to? Also, probably not. But there's something intriguing about them. I did have Bayside on my list as well, and I would also recommend the Bayside from the Saved by the Bell reboot that came out a couple years ago. We have the first season of that in our collection, so you can check out this new look at Bayside that actually casts a bit of a look at things like economic differences between school districts and the things that Bayside has that other schools don't. Just really an interesting update on a high school that I probably spent almost as much time in as my actual high school as well. Rydell High from Grease and Grease 2. In Greece, like they come to school, they go to the auto shop class, and that's pretty much it until the carnival at the end, and that's really all the impact school has. It's a bit more in Greece too, where Michelle Pfeiffer needs to be tutored by a guy who's determined to become her cool rider. I love Grease too. I like it has one of the best back to school songs in Back to School. They actually spend time in classes. There are songs about classes. I highly recommend checking out Grease 2 if you haven't seen it lately. Just a lot of fun happening there.
I was just going to say, good news for you, Caroline, is that I think if you went to Rydell High, you would be the average age of the students that were depicted in the movie. So
that's true.
You would fit in perfectly fine.
That's true. It comes around every now and then. I think, Stockard Channing famously was like, I think 34, 37 or something, or 34 playing a 17-year-old. And then the actor who plays Sonny as well will be like, this person is a teenager, and it's clearly a man in middle age. But
he has a mortgage. Yeah, he's got kids.
Yeah. He's seen some stuff. Grease, I think, definitely captures some element of school that has nothing to do with school at all. Degrassi and its various schools, Degrassi High, Degrassi Junior High, Degrassi Community School. I wouldn't want to go there. I could not take the drama. Having to deal with something coming up every single week, just not for me, but might be fun to visit for a while. And the last one, Breaker High. Did either of you watch this show? It was high school set on a cruise ship, starring Ryan Gosling and a bunch of other actors who've gone on to long careers in different things. Persia White, Tyler Levine, Terry Conn, but different. I don't know. I mean, the idea of spending a lot of time on a cruise ship hits a little differently post COVID, or post 2020, I guess. We're not even really post COVID yet, but something about that adventure of going out and seeing the world and not having any parents around at the same time. So Breaker High was probably where I wished I could be. So, for our quick roundtable questions this week, the first one. It's time to vote for student council. Which fictional characters are making up your student council? President, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Kyle, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I'm going for a female-led cabinet here, and I wonder if part of that is because the way in which female or feminine presented characters are presented in pop culture is that they're more diligent and responsible. Regardless, I'm going with Missy Foreman Greenwald to be my president from Big Mouth. She can be a creative visionary type. She's a little bit older than my VP choice, which makes for, a little bit more maturity and age-derived leadership that she'd get from that. My vice president, in a similar mold, is Lisa Simpson. Of course, extremely ethical and passionate and brilliant. Secretary, I'd go with Matilda. I think she's younger. Maybe she can use some minutes some magic to whip up those minutes really quickly. And it's probably a good starter executive position for a younger person on the team. And then for treasurer, I'll go with Hermione Granger. Again, she's a Gryffindor. She's got a fierce moral code, and so she'll be very careful with that money. And unless she has to break a rule in which she will have a good reason for doing it, and I think she showed that throughout the book. So that's my cabinet. I think it'd be a pretty good one.
Nice, Bryce.
So you're going to like this pick, Caroline. So my president, believe it or not, is Paris Geller from Gilmore Girls. She's a little bit of a hard ass, but she gets stuff done. So you have to respect the process. So Paris Geller is my president. Vice president, I went with Carlton Banks from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I think he'd be able to I think he'd be a good kind of somebody to kind of face off if need be against Paris Geller if, she gets a little out of hand. So I think they would also, maybe I could see them maybe start dating. It's kind of like they don't get along, but then they become like this power couple at the high school. My secretary, you need to have somebody like really popular on student council, I think. So I picked Cher from Clueless. She would be the secretary of student council. And my treasurer is Mark Ratner from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He's the assistant manager at the movie theater, so he's used to being in these responsible roles, and he just seems like he'd be like you could trust him to kind of get everything done, keep expense of everything, and you wouldn't have to worry about a thing, I think, with Mark Ratner on the case.
I don't know. One word from Damone, and I think he's handing it over to him. So
no, there's no way he's handing any of that money over to Damone. How about your student council?
Okay, mine, I almost had Lisa Simpson as vice president, but then I went in a different direction. So for president, I have Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, experience with leadership as president of the Delta News. So awesome. I'm happy about that. For vice president, I have Tracy Flick from Election. She's ambitious. She's gonna be pushing it, Elle Woods, but I think having that strong leader she can look up to in Elle might temper some of that ambition just a little bit. I think they could work really well together. Secretary, I have the character of Jennifer from Pleasantville, the one who goes back in time in the TV show. She just really needs someone to believe in her and take a chance on her and see her. She's pretty, she's popular, but she's also more than that. And the treasurer rounding this out is Annette Hargrove from Cruel Intentions, the only person in that movie who has any kind of scruples. She's going to be honest. She's going to be diligent. So yeah, Annette rounds out my student council.
I like your all Reese Witherspoon student council there. That's pretty good. I think I might have put Tracy Flick as my president though, but just because that's a powder keg waiting to happen, I think, with Elle Woods.
I don't know. I think Elle needs to be the face of it, and Tracy Flick is the power behind the scenes.
Makes
But yeah,
sense.
it could definitely, it's either going to be the best year ever or it's going to implode by Thanksgiving. Second question, if you could go back to school and study anything, what would it be? Bryce, I'll start with you.
Well, this career right now is not high in demand, and I'd be doing it for the love of it. But and it's something I actually did consider going back to school to do about 15 or so years ago, and that's journalism. It's just something that's always interested me, and yeah, at one point I was like, oh, why didn't I do that? But it's a very tough field to be in at the moment. But I would still choose journalism.
Kyle, how about you?
Actually, kind of similar to Bryce, and I don't know if there's actually a school path for this, but I think the great career that I never had was as a guidebook writer. I've always had such a passion for travel and tourism. I worked as summer jobs for Travel Alberta. It was really cool. I worked in Field, BC, so right beside Lake Louise. I worked in Montana, and I worked in Hinton. So those were really great summer jobs. But I just adored the ways in which those books serve as both entry points to the destination, but also as really practical resource guides for navigating them. So I think that's what I would do, even though I don't know if there's a program for that. So maybe a Lonely Planet internship or something like that. More practically, maybe I do my PhD in library and information studies, but I think that ship has sailed. So I'd like to keep it a little bit more fun.
Caroline, how about you? What are you becoming?
I'm not quite as ambitious as either of you. I think I'm just going to start out with a single course and then see how it goes from there. But it would be art history. I've always wanted to know a bit more about the different styles and eras and techniques and all of that, and talk a bit more confidently about art. So art or architecture, I think history of, that's what I would look into. And I keep thinking, oh, maybe this will be the semester that I actually look into doing that, and maybe someday soon that will be true. So I guess we will see. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kyle. This has been so much fun. I think I've worked through a lot of my feelings about school and August, September, back to school season. Is there anything you'd like to let our listeners know about?
Yeah, I think a digital resource at EPL that I'd like to plug is one called Solero as we're returning to school. So Solero is a real gem within our collection. What it does is it provides Alberta-specific curriculum information and test preparation that you get in the Key or SNAP publications, but it's available online and pretty much wherever you are. So they're available for grades 3 to 12, and it's a great support for students in that age range, accessible, at all times and free to use. So highly recommend that, parents expose their kids to this, or if you're a younger person listening to the podcast, you check it out at epl.ca.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can consider it to be your homework from this episode, tying into the school theme. Everyone loves homework, right? Even more importantly, tell a friend about the show.
And don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. And we love to hear from you, our listeners. And you can email us at podcast@epl.ca. And I know we had a pretty good list of our picks today, but is there something that we missed? Is there maybe a teacher we should have mentioned or a different school? Let us know. Email us at podcast@epl.ca, or you can also reach us on Twitter at epl.ca and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.